The Midterms, You Decide 2014.
Welcome back, everybody. You Decide 2014 continues right here on the Newsmax Network, along with J.D. Hayworth. I'm Ed Berliner. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to get right to the newsroom now. John Bachman has got some news on what's happening in the gubernatorial race in Massachusetts. John?
Well, we are hearing that race is going to go in favor of the Republicans, but I do want to talk about some projected winners that we have right now, including in Texas, where Greg Abbott, the Republican gubernatorial candidate there, has been announced the winner. Also, 4 Senate seats pickups for Republicans right now. Mike Rounds in South Dakota defeated Democrat Rick Weiland, also and Tim Johnson, who was retiring there, to replace him. And Republican incumbent John Cornyn won his race in Texas, no surprise there. And Democrat Gary Peters won the race for the Michigan Senate seat being vacated by Carl Levin. And also Nebraska, the Republican candidate there, Ben Sass, putting that one in the win column for the GOP as well. Guys, back to you.
All right, John, thanks so much. You were making a point before the break here about what's happening in Virginia.
It's just very interesting. I think back to 2004, Ed Gillespie, former House staffer, had gone over to become a big operative in the Republican Party, in fact, the Republican National Chair, asked me to join him to be a debate crasher, the Democrats having a huge presidential debate in Phoenix. We went, walked in. Terry McAuliffe, the high-powered Democrat donor, had us thrown out. Made a little bit of news to have a member of Congress and the Republican National Chairman thrown out of the debate. But now, of course, Terry McAuliffe is the governor of Virginia. Imagine if he has to work with a new senator. If Ed Gillespie hangs on and wins this, forget strange bedfellows, the whole dynamic changes in the Old Dominion. It'll be very curious to watch that, and that's something that will be the stuff of a lot of analysis if Gillespie can hang on to his winning margin, or the margin where he's ahead right now in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Gillespie's really your favorite story of the night thus far, isn't it?
This would be a huge surprise. Nobody had it on the radar screen.
And when you look at the radar screen, we're looking right now at half. The Republicans are half where they need to go. And if the incumbents hold charge for the rest of the evening here, they have exactly what they need to get there. So everything else is holding very nice. And it's always nice that one surprise comes up here. And then the other surprise we're hearing thus far is that Rick Scott is actually holding on in Florida, which really nobody expected. It looked like Charlie Crist was going to, how shall we say, carpetbag his way back into getting a check in Florida.
I don't know, maybe ping pong his way back in, given the changes he's made. One thing in defense of Charlie Crist, and obviously we line up on opposite sides of the aisle now, Crist has been remarkably personable as a politician and as a guy. Rick Scott, a competent executive, not a lot of interpersonal skills. We'll still wait and see how that turns out.
That's very true. I'm going to agree with you on that one completely. You're right. All right, let's turn now to Steve Malzberg, live in New York. He's joined by John Fund, Wall Street Journal columnist and frequent political contributor to cable news networks. Steve, pleasure to see you again. What's the take in New York thus far from what we've seen?
All right, well, it's been a very interesting night, and John, when we left the air at 8 o'clock about an hour and a half ago, or hour 25 minutes ago, a lot has developed. 3 seats picked up so far by the Republicans. They need 3 more to take control of the Senate, and of course a lot of interesting races still going on, not the least of which is Virginia. What's striking to you?
Well, let's take a look at 3 governors' races. Pennsylvania, the Republicans are going to lose the governorship, and largely because the governor there didn't push a reform agenda through the legislature of his own party. So a Republican governor basically was spurned by his own legislature, branded a failure in terms of setting his agenda. The Democrats took the governorship back. Competence. Then you have Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Martha Coakley, perhaps the most incompetent Senate candidate of recent memory, lost to Scott Brown in 2010. She ran for governor this year. She's losing again to a Republican.
Yeah.
Rhode Island. A Republican is winning a 3-way race for governor of Rhode Island. So you're seeing a lot of interesting things happening in states that are not necessarily on normal Republican-Democrat battlegrounds, but on reform versus the status quo.
Yeah, and that, I mean, does that speak to, as you phrased it, incumbents, an anti-incumbent message, or does that...
A change message.
Yeah.
A change message, because Rhode Island and Massachusetts were both open seats.
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about, the minority vote in the exit polls. Republicans were crushed among Latino and Asian voters in 2012. They got 29% of Latinos, 27% of Asians. Bit of a comeback this time. Democrats only won 64% of Latinos this time, 52% of Asians, and they lost the American Indian vote. So Republicans did very well, especially among Latino men. They cleared 40%. This is significant. This shows that Reince Priebus at the RNC, his efforts to reach out to minorities paid some dividends this time.
Yeah, no, and that's very important, especially going forward. A lot has been made about Rand Paul's efforts with the minority community and communities. Okay, we're going to, John, send it back to Florida, to Ed Berliner and J.D. Hayworth. Guys?
All right, Steve, thanks a lot. While you guys were talking, we were just handed this. Jeanne Shaheen has won the Senate race in New Hampshire. So you talked about Scott Brown there for a moment. J.D., here we go. Scott Brown will not get a chance to taste victory this evening.
Well, it is tough to make that kind of transition, even across the state line, given the interplay between New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Jeanne Shaheen hangs on, but there are other opportunities for the Republicans, who seem to be in the driver's seat in terms of taking the majority. We'll continue to monitor the results all evening long.
All right, slight road bump, if you will, then, for the Republicans. Jeanne Shaheen takes the Senate race in New Hampshire. We'll have more right here on the Newsmax Network right after this.
The Midterms You Decide 2014 will be back in just a moment.